What if I told you that the grand sweep of history, all the big stuff, the rise and fall of empires, the outcomes of major wars, what if I told you it all hangs by the tiniest, most fragile threads? That the biggest, most world-altering events are actually kicked off by moments so small, so seemingly insignificant, that you'd barely even notice them. Well, today we're opening up the repository of insignificance. We're going to look at the small moments that literally changed everything. Take this number. 20 million. That's the estimated number of people who died in World War I. I mean, just let that sink in. It was a conflict that completely redrew the map of the modern world. It toppled ancient empires, and really, it set the stage for the entire 20th century. And the chain reaction that led to all of that devastation and loss, was started by a driver taking a wrong turn and a hungry teenager who decided, in that exact moment, to go grab a sandwich. Right? That's the big question, isn't it? How can something so tiny, so random, have consequences that are just that massive? It feels like it shouldn't be possible. But as we're about to see, history is way more fragile, way more chaotic than we like to think. I love this quote from our source material because it just hits the nail on the head. We have this idea of history as this solid, inevitable thing, a mountain range of giants making big, important decisions. But the reality? It's much more like a house of cards. So delicate that one tiny nudge in just the wrong spot can bring the whole thing crashing down. So, let's dive into our first exhibit. We're calling this one the human glitch. And these are those moments of pure, unpredictable chance. A weird coincidence, a simple mistake, a strange twist of fate that ends up changing the world. Okay, so let's go back to that sandwich. Just look at this unbelievable sequence of events. The first assassination attempt on Archduke Franz Ferdinand that morning, it fails. A bomb goes off, but he's fine. He decides to go visit the people who were injured in the hospital. But here's the glitch. Nobody tells his driver that the route has been changed. So the driver takes the original route, makes a wrong turn, and stalls the car right in front of a deli where a totally dejected Gabriel Princip is grabbing a sandwich thinking he'd failed his mission. He just looks up, and there's his target, 5 feet away. A total fluke. And the rest, as they say, is tragic, world-changing history. All right, now let's jump forward about 75 years to another human glitch. This one, thankfully, had a much happier ending. I'm talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall, a truly monumental event that was accidentally triggered by a tired, unprepared bureaucrat at a totally routine press conference. It all came down to a few words. This guy, Gunter Schabowski, gets handed a memo right before he goes on stage, and he hasn't really read it. So a reporter asks him, when do these new, looser travel rules take effect? The memo clearly said the plan was for tomorrow to keep things orderly, but he missed that part. So he just kind of shrugs and says, immediately, without delay. Thousands of people watching live on TV heard that, rushed to the wall, and the guards, who had no idea what was going on, were totally overwhelmed. They just opened the gates. And just like that, the Iron Curtain came down because of a verbal typo. Okay, our second exhibit moves from pure chance to something a lot more common, carelessness. This is what we can call the mechanics of negligence. It's not about wild fate. It's about people just being forgetful or messy or in too much of a hurry. I mean, the sinking of the Titanic is the perfect tragic example. There's a last-minute crew change, and Second Officer David Blair gets reassigned. As he's leaving the ship, he's in a rush, and he forgets one tiny thing: to hand over the key to the locker that held the ship's binoculars. Because of that one forgotten key, the lookouts on that dark, moonless night had nothing but their own eyes to try and scan the horizon. And the result of that one little oversight? Over 1,500 lives lost. It's heartbreaking because experts are pretty sure that with binoculars, they would have spotted the iceberg just a few seconds earlier, and those few seconds would have been just enough time to steer clear and avoid the disaster entirely. But here's the thing about negligence. It's not always a tragedy. In fact, one of the greatest medical discoveries in all of human history happened precisely because a scientist was, well, kind of a slob. I am, of course, talking about the discovery of penicillin. Just think about it for a second. A really tidy, organized scientist, they would have cleaned their petri dishes before going on a 2-week vacation. But Alexander Fleming? Nope, he just piled his in the sink. A tidy scientist would have shut the window tight. Fleming left one cracked open. And because of that, a random mold spore floated in, landed on one of those dirty dishes, and when Fleming got back, he noticed something incredible. The mold was killing all the bacteria around it. That single moment of sloppiness has gone on to save an estimated 200 million lives. Amazing, right? Okay, for our last category, we're looking at how the biggest, most brilliant plans of generals and emperors can be totally undone by the simplest things: arrogance, a little distraction, or just the physical world itself. This is the fog of war. So, it's Christmas 1776. The American Revolution is, frankly, on the verge of collapsing. George Washington decides to plan this desperate, Hail Mary surprise attack. His target? A garrison of Hessian mercenaries. These guys were total pros, and their commander, Colonel Johann Rall, was a brave soldier who thought the American rebels were an absolute joke. And that arrogance, that complete dismissal of his enemy, well, it turned out to be the revolution's saving grace. You see, while Washington's army was on the move, a farmer who was loyal to the British spotted them. He scribbled a warning note and rushed it over to Colonel Rall's headquarters. The note was handed to Rall while he was in the middle of a card game. Distracted, he didn't even look at it. He just stuffed it into his pocket to read later. The next morning, he was found mortally wounded with that still unopened note in his pocket. If he'd just paused his game for 10 seconds to read it, the United States probably wouldn't exist today. And what about Napoleon Bonaparte? I mean, one of the greatest military geniuses of all time. At Waterloo, his brilliance was defeated by mud. Yeah, mud. His plan was perfect. Attack at the crack of dawn, use his superior artillery to smash the British forces. But a massive thunderstorm the night before had turned the entire battlefield into a swamp. He couldn't move his cannons, he had to wait for hours, and that delay gave the Prussian army just enough time to show up and completely change the outcome of the battle. So, after all these stories, what's the point? What do we take away from this? Because these aren't just quirky little historical facts. They actually tell us something really fundamental about how the world works. We've physically seen 3 different ways that these tiny moments can shape our world. You've got the human glitch, those random coincidences, like saying the wrong word and bringing down a wall. Then there's the mechanics of negligence, where forgetting a key sinks a ship, or being messy saves millions. And finally, the fog of war, where a card game or a rainstorm can decide the fate of entire nations. And this, right here, is the most important part. History isn't just something that happens to us, something we read about in books. It's something we are all actively a part of, every single day. Our small actions, our little mistakes, our moments of laziness, they are all threads in the massive tapestry of what's to come. And if you want one last, just absolutely mind-blowing example, think about D-Day. Erwin Rommel, the German general in charge of defending France from invasion, was gone when it started. He was away from his post because he thought the weather was too bad for an attack, so he went home to Germany to give his wife a pair of shoes for her birthday. Because of a birthday gift, the initial German response was slow, confused, and the Allies were able to get their foothold in Europe. And that really just leaves us with one final thought to chew on. If history really is a house of cards built from forgotten keys and unread notes and wrong turns, then what seemingly insignificant thing that you do today might just become the turning point for a future none of us can even begin to imagine?
Please like and subscribe.